This is the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is not a traditional interview show. These are perspective driven conversations with founders, builders, and independent creators shaping what comes next. We go beyond headlines, beyond hype, and beyond price to explore ownership, freedom, and opportunity in the digital economy, where builders talk freedom, not price. Hello, and welcome back to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan. And today I'm looking forward to a founder conversation with Kat Cloud from SumSub. Kat, welcome.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for having me.
It's an honor. I'm very glad you're here. And today I want to talk about, look beyond the headlines, right? And explore like bigger themes of identity, trust, verification, and how AI is changing the way we think about them, just as importantly, I want to hear about your personal journey, your founder's journey, how you got into this field, and the lessons that you've learned along the way. So let's start out. Before entering this field you're in now, and before working at SumSub, what was your path?
It's definitely probably been a little bit unconventional. So I've accidentally, I would say, always kind of been focused on emerging technology, just kind of changes in society through innovation. And I say it was accidental because it wasn't actually something that I sought out. And before I was actually at SumSub, I worked at the Financial Conduct Authority, which is the UK financial regulator. And again, actually, I kind of fell into that. I was applying for a bunch of different grad schemes, and it was the one that actually offered me the role the first. So I took it. Absolutely loved it. I was there for 3.5 years. And while I was there, I was in a really unique position where I got to work on drafting policy and regulation. And it was a really unique time for the UK because we were actually going through all of the Brexit process. So essentially, part of my role was to take all of the EU legislation and translate it into UK local law. And when I was doing that, I was specifically looking at things like open banking, crypto a little bit, but more kind of innovation in general. And so when I then made the move out from the public sector into the private sector, I then went and worked for two different open banking companies. And then my move to SumSub actually, the timing was perfect because it was a point in my career where I'd been doing open banking for about 10 years and I was ready for something different and something a bit more challenging. And SumSub came knocking and it's been a really good kind of transition and a really fun 18 months now where I get to work with governments, regulators, and I'm still kind of at the crux of that innovation and kind of emerging technology. And it's really been fun to kind of take myself out of the regulated space and operate in the non-regulated space because it does change the conversations you can have with regulators and the conversations you can have with governments. And some stuff is kind of in that unique position where we are supporting like some of the largest crypto exchanges, but then on the other side of the coin, we're also supporting non-regulated industries as well.
Got it. So what attracted you the most to digital identity and fraud prevention?
So I've actually always been attracted to any type of technology that is on the more tangible side or that you and I as everyday consumers, it's something that actually impacts our lives. Because that's actually just how I get motivated for work is if I can walk into a bank branch and see a poster that I had a hand in putting, or if I can kind of see that there's a government ID that's being introduced into a new country that SumSub has helped support. That's always kind of been my driving factor. And digital identity, it was more kind of like what I said earlier was I was ready for something slightly different. And I'd heard a lot of conversations around digital ID, around crypto, and also around deep fakes. And kind of having been working at the financial regulator, fraud does come up all the time, naturally, especially in the open banking and the payment space. So when I started doing my research after my conversations with SumSub, I was like, this is actually really, really interesting. And there's a huge opportunity to influence and introduce rules and regulations, but also products and services that are actually going to genuinely help consumers try and fight fraud. Because I hate to admit it, but I have fallen victim to fraud. It doesn't matter how interacted you are with financial services. I think every consumer is always at that risk. So having kind of fallen victim to fraud and then being able to be at a company or just in a field that is really focused on trying to make sure consumers' identities aren't stolen or introduce the right roadblocks so that it's harder for fraudsters to take this type of data. That is really kind of what motivated me and helps motivate me kind of every day to keep working in this space.
So that's interesting. What did that personal experience from being the victim of fraud teach you? And if you want to share what that story was, you can feel free. But if not, just the lessons that you learned and then what motivated you after.
Yeah, so I was trying to buy tickets to a concert, and I bought them through Facebook Marketplace. But the person obviously, after I transferred the money, the account then was deactivated. I couldn't contact them, and I tried the traditional methods of like going through Facebook Marketplace support, reporting the person, but obviously the money was gone. There was nothing that Facebook could do in that sense. I also then tried to contact my bank, but again, because I'd actually gone through PayPal, I hadn't done the proper ways of doing it, and I said yes to all of the terms and conditions that we all don't actually read. I was never able to get a refund. So it was just actually the main thing that it taught me was that really truly anybody is able to fall victim to fraud. And it really helped me to see kind of more of the emotional side of fraud. Because I remember I used to always sit there and be like, I don't understand how. Like you'd watch the documentaries on Netflix or on any of those shows, and you always sit there and you kind of think, how could they not realize? But what it really taught me was that I really, really wanted that ticket. So even if I thought it was a little bit suspicious, because I wanted the ticket so badly, I was willing to kind of overlook those things and still go ahead with the payment. I think my biggest lesson learned was that there is always going to be that emotional side that causes a lot of people who traditionally we probably wouldn't think would fall victim to fraud are actually able to fall victim to fraud. And it's just the little things. Like I was very fortunate it wasn't a huge expense, but you do have some individual consumers who unfortunately do fall victim to larger amounts of money that are stolen from them. So it kind of allowed me to be in the shoes of someone who might be falling victim to this. And then it allowed me also to understand the whole process of trying to like A, tell someone that you've fallen victim to fraud, and then B, try and just understand if you can actually get your money back is so confusing. Like, obviously, I'm coming from a UK specific example, but it's just so confusing. So, kind of a big thing that I always like to think about is what are the ways or how can someone like SumSub step in and try and make that process a lot smoother and a lot easier? Because, like I said, mine was a small amount, but I can only imagine if someone had spent or had sent their life savings to a fraudster, the amount of emotional and stress that you're going through, and no one can really help you. If there is something that someone like SubSub can do to try and make that harder, then that's really kind of the key thing that we need to start doing as an industry.
Yeah, that makes all sense in the world to me. Was it a decent concert at least, or was it a good concert? What was it?
It was actually, it was a bingo, where I went with a bunch of my friends. I actually ended up winning a blow up doll. I forget of who, but we did make it in the end. So we actually ended up finding another seller on Facebook Marketplace and got tickets. So we did make it in the end, but it definitely was a lesson learned for me.
Got it. I uh I get a lot of spam emails from Gmail accounts on my, and they're impersonating, you
There.
know, editors and publishers and stuff. And one person that got a little far, and they were like, "Oh, this is what I need from you. I need access to your podcast archive." And right there, I was like, "You ain't getting that. No
Yeah,
one's getting that. Bye bye."
exactly.
So, um, I
One
want
trick
to.
I actually read about over the weekend, because there's a huge increase in the number of people who, like, let's say I went to Australia to go traveling and someone is trying to defraud my family. They can easily find like my mom, my dad, they're saved in my phone as that, or my grandparents. And so what I've actually done with my family is I've said like, not like a safe word, but like a word. So if that scenario were to ever happen, they know to come to almost like ask me like, okay, what is your favorite fruit? but they know that it's a specific fruit that I should respond with. And if it's not that, then they're like, okay, this is fraud. Let me walk away.
Smart. I like that. So let's talk about the world. They have this, we call it soccer here in the U.S. and you're in England, right? So you're in Final Four, which is great. Congratulations. I was rooting for Norway, but it's okay.
Always two.
But
It's okay.
I want to find out. It is one of those largest events, at least digital events in the world too, and just being just played on the soccer field, right, or the football field. Why does an event like this, the World Cup, become an important test for identity and trust systems?
Because I think it's one of those situations in the world, and then they don't come that often. Like, yes, they're kind of cyclical. So obviously, the World Cup is every 4 years. Olympics is Summer Olympics every 4 years. Winter is every four. Like, there's a cyclical nature to them, but it's also because of that, it makes it a lot more easier for a fraudster to know, like, oh, again, kind of going back to my example, so many people, like for you, Messi, for example, this is potentially his last World Cup. A lot of people really, really want to see him play in the last World Cup. So there's that emotional angle to it. And I think fraudsters know that. They know that people are going to be more willing. So because it's so repetitive, they can almost forecast the types of consumers and the emotional tie. So it creates this like almost the perfect conditions. And I hate to say perfect conditions, but the perfect conditions that fraudsters who understand these trends are going to leverage. And I think also now, kind of you take along just society in general, society is significantly more digital than in the past. Digital payments, like marketplace, even crypto adoption, like all of that, you then tie into kind of the repetitive cyclical nature of these types of global events. It's the perfect combination for a fraudster because they know that everyone's going to be wanting to buy tickets. They're probably not going to be able to get them through the primary seller. So then they're going to have to go to the secondary seller, which then opens it up a lot more. And that's just kind of looking at the ticket side of things. On top of it, you also have a lot of people are going through hotels or they're booking on Airbnb. And so there's so many different facets of these types of global events where consumers have to engage digitally, and it just makes it a lot easier for fraudsters to kind of interact at different stages of kind of the holiday journey or the vacation journey that's tied with these people going to the games, that they can then use that to kind of build in fraud technology and build in ways to kind of, unfortunately, defraud these consumers who are trying to go to something that has nothing to do with fraud at the beginning.
That makes a lot of sense. So, what like emotional, like what kind of fraud are you seeing become more common around these global events?
I'd say it's a mixture. Kind of one that's happened a lot, and we've seen it along these global events. We've also seen it with concerts, and again, I even fell victim to it. Is you get these individuals who create accounts that look validated, they look legitimate, but then and like you might even receive a ticket, but the ticket's not actually, it's not a real ticket. It's a fake ticket that has been doctored in a way or forged in a way that you then go to the gates to scan it and it doesn't work. And you've now been sold a fake ticket, but throughout the entire process, you didn't know. And I think that's actually the key thing. So it's more that like we see this kind of in general across the fraud landscape is there's a huge increase in sophisticated fraud. Where so traditionally there might have been like a gut feeling or someone contacting you and saying, I need your archives, like things that would traditionally a flag would be raised and when you might take a step back. With the rise of like AI, we're seeing that those traditional feelings are a lot harder to identify as a consumer. And so you're seeing this journey that like every part of it might look legitimate. But then the final stage of it, that's where you get the document forgeries again, or that's where you get the questioning start happening. But at that point, you're so far into the journey that it's just there's more sophistication around the way these fraudsters are interacting. So we're definitely seeing kind of the traditional, just forged tickets. We also do see a lot of forged listings. That's also very common. I know Airbnb has done a huge push on just kind of trying to educate individuals who are booking through their platform that make sure you read the reviews, look for things. If there's only two reviews, maybe start questioning it, but like try and identify what could be a potentially fake listing to better educate yourself and ask those right questions. Like, okay, there's only one review. this doesn't seem legitimate, or this price seems really, really low compared to everything else that's currently like priced out on the market. Let me ask some more questions. So there's definitely, but again, that's kind of a sophisticated, they've put something, they've probably gone through all the checks that Airbnb has whenever someone's listing their property, but it still could be a fake property. So it's really that sophisticated kind of influence that's happening to the fraud that the actual fraud itself is quite your standard fraud where it's just a forged document or a forged listing. But it's the way that it's been built in and the multiple layers of checks or validations that they've gone through to get to that phase, but you still end up, unfortunately, falling victim to fraud.
Yeah, I think I saw one that I don't know how you prevent this, but there was they listed the the property on Airbnb,
Mhm.
and then the people came. I think the last people listed it. They came, and then the people who were there made a copy of the key, and then they came in the next week when another people were there, and they stole everything the next family brought. So I'm like, how do you prevent that? That's actual real theft, you know. So how would you like begin to even know that the person has malicious intent before you even arrive? Like, you know,
Exactly. It's so difficult, especially with those types of things. And that's why you do see a lot of Airbnbs or just like apartments in general, even in hotels. A lot of them try and go through those extra hoops and ladders to also do the identifications. Like I know recently I went to Portugal and they asked for my passport information. So that way, in the event that something happened or I turned out to be a malicious individual, so not only is sometimes it's a regulatory requirement if you are going to be doing Airbnb in some countries, but it's also for them in case there is criminal intent, they can always follow up and then they can pass that information to the local police force and say, we know who was last here. We know who the person is almost at fault. So it's there's steps that people are taking kind of throughout this entire journey, like even on Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster has introduced new checks and new kind of steps that people need to go through if they're going to be doing kind of the second layer of sending tickets or of selling tickets on their platforms, just to try and kind of introduce the right mitigation tools that they can to try and protect the end consumer who's trying to either buy that ticket or stay in that apartment.
got it, got it. So the lessons from the World Cup that you're seeing, how do they apply to people beyond sports, and what's your recommendation to people to what to watch out for in this new dangerous world of AI's transformation of everything?
I would say always, if something feels wrong in your gut, go with your gut. Always double check. And if it's you're buying a ticket on a platform, make sure that you're doing it through a trusted platform. Because a lot of times, some of those platforms will actually have additional protections in the event that you are sold a false ticket or a fake ticket. Also, make sure that, again, if you are using a platform, keep the messaging on the platform because that actually does protect you in some cases as well. Whereas the second you then move it to either iMessage or just text message in general, some of those protections are taken away. So keep it on the platform. And my other kind of big thing, especially as someone who has done it, is test it. So one of the things that actually when I fell victim to buying a ticket on Facebook Marketplace that a friend told me, she was like, in the future, just test it. Send a pound or send a dollar and be like, oh, I just want to make sure that these account details are correct. So I'm just going to test it with a dollar. And then if the account goes if it works, okay. That's not always a foolproof method. It's just kind of an option. Whereas sometimes the fraudster will wait until you send the full amount but try and almost introduce steps. So that way you are trying to protect yourself as much as possible. From kind of the other side of things, deepfakes are very hard. It's always a challenge to kind of identify those as an individual. But again, kind of if you have a gut feeling, look at the video and look at the mouth. Does it match up? Is this the type of video or interaction or conversation that that person would actually be saying? So does it make sense for, I don't know, pulling on another football player? Does it make sense for Messi to be in a, I don't know, beer commercial? Maybe not. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But just again, kind of think, does this person and this conversation make sense in this video or in this context? And then I'd kind of also say just general fraud tips that we always kind of push at SumSub is really, especially on the financial side of things, make sure that you are using it through kind of your bank or your kind of chosen platforms. Like if it's crypto, there's obviously some regulatory protections within crypto. Same with traditional financial services with bank transfers. So really try and keep it on those trusted platforms. And then kind of again use that 1 pound test. See if that introduces it or causes any concerns or troubles, but also keep a record of any of this. Because when you do, if you do end up falling victim to it, if you have the records of the conversations or of the things, you can always use that to try and get some remediation. I cannot guarantee you'll get your full remediation, but it does help to kind of have those records. And I would say also for all of that, definitely works in the context of the World Cup. We're almost there. We're in the last week. But I think also just in general, it's a lot of tools and tips, I would say, for kind of just your digital life because everything is becoming more and more digital, and we're not going to go away from that because there are many benefits to it. So just anytime you are spending money online or purchasing things online, just kind of be cautious, be careful of those types of things, and do whatever you feel necessary to kind of protect yourself and also protecting your identity, your data, so that way you do not fall victim to fraud.
Thank you. That sounds good. You've spent so it started with Brexit and the FCA in the UK. So it means you spent quite a long time and a number of years working in digital identity.
Yeah.
So, which means that you probably your idea of trust has probably evolved over time. So, how has what's your trust like? How's that changed over time?
I think it's definitely I've become less trustworthy. Shocker there. Um, but I've become less trustworthy, but also more trustworthy. So my friends always make fun of me because I was a huge pusher in the open banking and fintech and mobile money space. I will always have a brick and mortar bank though because I love the fact that I can go into the bank branch and I can talk to a human and I can physically do it. Yes, there's mobile phones. You can call up someone in a customer service, but I love the fact that I can go into a store. So my friends always make fun of me because like you're always pushing for fintech and like I made my livelihood off of fintech and yet you still have a brick and mortar. So it's my trust has kind of changed in that sense that I do still feel there's a huge value in being able to go into, for this example, a bank branch or just being able to have that human interaction because they'll understand. And when you have the emotional side of things as well, they also understand that and they can kind of help you work through that. I think the other areas of trust, it's actually made me, in a weird way, because I have very little trust, I've also become more curious. So I was one of, at least within kind of my friendship group, I was one of the first people to get crypto. I mainly did it because I felt if I'm writing the rules and regulation on crypto, I should kind of have a sense of what it is. So I put, I think it was 20 pounds in a crypto account and I just played with it a little bit just to get a sense of what it was. But it's having that curiosity, but also having the trust of doing the additional research. So I didn't just pick any crypto. I took the time to actually read, okay, this one is FSCA backed, or this one is backed by whatever country it's operating in. So I took the time because I wanted to I'm not so untrustworthy that I don't want to try new innovations. And I think that that's a key thing because there's a lot of people who are like, nope, I don't want to touch it because it's not traditional financial services. And I think that's where we need to focus on is have the trust, but the trust needs to be meaning doing the research, finding the evidence and picking something that you are comfortable with. Because there were some crypto that were or exchanges that were performing very well that I probably could hopefully be retired on a beach right now. But because I didn't necessarily trust them as much because they didn't have the right consumer protections or the right types of regulation behind them, I wasn't as willing to do that. So it's my trust has definitely changed in the fact that I'm probably now less trustworthy. So for example, like I refuse to get a joint account with my husband because I have a deathly fear that he's going to run away with all of our money, which unfortunately can happen in a joint account in the UK. So my trust has changed in that way. But then I think my trust isn't so gone that I'm not still curious. And that's where I think a really big thing is that we need to continue to be curious. So I do have crypto, I do have stocks that I trade. Like I'm always trying to learn about what's new in the market, but make sure that I'm doing it in a way where I still trust the institutions that I'm putting my money with. And that comes by doing the research of understanding, okay, do you have the right consumer protections for me? Do you have kind of the correct regulatory licenses that I would expect if you're operating in these spaces?
I wasn't planning on asking you about your thoughts on your husband running away from Bitcoin, but now that you brought it up, though, I would sort of find out, what has surprised you the most about human behavior when it comes to trust and fraud?
I think the thing that's actually surprising the most is the amount of trust we have as humans, which I find very, very interesting. And I actually, if I take it to like an online dating world, so I think those are some of the most prevalent stories that we're all probably seeing on the news, on Netflix, etc. And I love those. They're a very easy watch. But one of the things the biggest question I always have is how do these people not know? How could they trust this person so much that they would give them their entire life savings or that they would give them access to all their bank accounts? And that's actually the part that still to this day I'm shocked by. And I was on a panel a couple weeks ago with a AML officer from one of the big banks, and they were telling me that we can spot people who are continuously falling victim to romance fraud, for example, where they'll meet someone on an online platform and they'll transfer money. And she said in some cases, we will actually go and speak to this individual consumer. And it's obviously a very difficult conversation, but we'll tell them. And when she told me the story, I was like, well, like what do they say? And she's like, 9 out of 10 times they'll say that they understand they're falling victim to fraud, but they're lonely and this person's giving them attention. So it's very interesting kind of hearing that story, but also just seeing from like news articles, documentaries that by nature humans are very trustworthy towards each other, even if we know that this person isn't necessarily actually here for our benefit. So again, if I could just kind of give like advice would just be in those scenarios, do the right research. If something does feel off, or if you are asked these types of questions, then take the time to just really think about it and really understand. And if you are lonely, there are people that like you can talk to. There are other methods to reach out and have that human connection. You don't necessarily need to do it from an online dating platform, but really just kind of be aware and just not, I'm not saying don't trust other humans. There are some humans that are out there for our own good, but I do think the key message is definitely do the right research. If you are going to be purchasing something, or if you're going to be doing something where you are interacting online through crypto, just traditional buying something, have the right research and make sure that you are really truly comfortable with the purchases or the transfers that you are making online.
I don't fall for the romance scams. I get a lot of people with an Indian name reaching out to me on Telegram with a picture of an Asian woman asking me for my picture. And then it tries to fall in a romance scam. And I've been sending the pictures of Gary Gensler recently and, other political figures. They're like, oh, you're really cute. I'm like, oh, yeah. And then I changed, like, what do you want to talk about? It's like, then I order. I pretend they're a deli and I place a sandwich order. And then the algorithm breaks. So it's like, or they stop reaching out to me. I'm like, okay, well, that shut them up,
Yep.
So that's what I do. So technology, as you know, changes quickly, right? So how do you stay focused on solving long-term problems um, today?
I would say, I think actually what I always try and do is, because I find the easiest way to solve a long-term problem is to figure out what are the short-term wins that I could solve today. Because there's going to be things that you don't have the right technology today, or I don't have the right regulation, actually. That happens quite a lot in financial services where you don't have the right consumer protection framework, or you don't have the right like AI regulation. We've had AI for many years now. We're only just now seeing AI regulation. So, and I'm not saying that we need to regulate everything. I think it needs to obviously be proportionate, but you are sometimes going to have these grander issues that you genuinely can't solve today because there's certain, be it regulatory, be it licensing, be it even finance situations that you just can't solve. So I always try and say, okay, if I can't solve the big problem, what are the smaller problems that I could actually solve today or over the next 2 to 5 years? And that then also kind of really helps me, especially in a policy world where I'm speaking to regulators, I'm speaking to governments. If I can fix one problem here, that helps to fix the bigger problem over here, they're a lot more willing to have those types of collaborative conversations with you. And because they understand, like having also been a regulator, there were times I sat down in front of banks or fintechs and I said, guys, it's going to take me 18 months minimum to fix this. Whereas you can fix it tomorrow. And you can come to me and tell me the proof and show me the consumer benefit or show me how it's going to help the wider economy so that my 18-month timeline could potentially then be sped up to 6 months. But I need you to take the first steps first to help solve this problem. And if I'm doing that is the best possible way to try and also kind of influence how that longer term problem gets solved in my benefit as well.
Got it. So with AI, you have a rapidly expanding world.
Mhm.
You have the people's need for convenience,
Yep.
and you have privacy and you have safety, right? How do you make decisions when all four of those are pulling you in complete opposite directions?
For us, our biggest focus is really on like we are a B2B business, so obviously supporting and making sure that our clients have the right tools and platforms that they need. But we then ultimately, even though we're not a direct to consumer company, we ultimately are very, very focused on the consumer because a lot of the information we have, a lot of the tools that we build are ultimately actually for the benefit of the consumer. So our entire platform, kind of from the initial onboarding all the way to the ongoing monitoring, it's really focused on making sure that consumers' identity data isn't being used against them, isn't being used to conduct fraud. So we always look at these things and try and bring it back down to, okay, our mission and our focus is to make sure that every single person out there is able to verify themselves, even individuals who don't have traditional financial documents. How can we make sure that we stay true to that mission and we are continuously innovating and delivering products, solutions, education, etc., to kind of meet that ultimate demand, even in a world where we have so many different sides are being we're being pulled in so many different directions. So a lot of times we also will test it. So we've been spending the last couple of months testing and kind of exploring and exposing all of us at SumSub to AI tools to help us get comfortable with them to say, okay, Kat, how do you use AI tools? I'll be honest, I use it mostly to help me draft my emails. But like it's understanding kind of one of those different use cases. And then we also will go to our clients and we'll say, okay, how are you guys using AI to streamline either your personal lives or to streamline your company life? And we'll take all those lessons learned and then we'll try and build it into a tool or a product or again, even an education piece to make sure that people have the right access to information or the right access to tools. But it's kind of staying up and as relevant with the times as we can, knowing that technology is constantly changing and even that regulation is constantly changing. So we're really trying to kind of, again, kind of bring it back down to consumers, even though we're not direct to consumer, we are ultimately here to kind of protect consumers, but then also making sure that we're speaking to our clients. And I always never really like to call them clients. I always, because we do have clients and partners. To me, they're all just kind of one big group that we're not just out here like in a bubble creating products and saying, here you go, clients, make it work for your solution. We really do try and have those conversations with them because ultimately we want to understand how they're seeing these problems or how they're thinking about AI, for example, and if they want to use it or if they're just like, nope, we have no interest in AI. So it's really kind of collaborative and thinking about innovations changing, regulations changing. We need to try and stay as on top of it as we possibly can while still kind of promoting innovation and consumer protection.
Makes sense. So I want to find out, where do you see digital identity going over these next 5 years? And do you believe that trustworthy digital systems can still be built?
Definitely. I think so. I'm answering your second part first, but I think 100%. And I think we're actually in a really interesting time where we have some countries like Estonia, for example, they have had a government-backed digital identity system for years now. It is so second nature to Estonians. They don't even think about it. It's just, yep, it's on my phone. That's how I verify my identity across the country. It's super useful. We also have it in countries like Singapore where they have SingPass. So I think the idea of digital identity is not going to go anywhere. If it does go anywhere, it's going to go towards government backed, which is actually something that we at SumSub do agree with, because the government needs to be the single source of truth. There is a role for private companies like SumSub, our competitors, etc., to play, because we're the innovation arm of that. But it really needs to be a government backed because they are the single source of truth. Multiple parties should not be able to verify my passport. It should just be the US government or the British government. So it's going to be like, I'd say in the next 5 years, we're going to see these hybrid models that are built and introduced in different countries, probably definitely at a phased approach, but we're going to see where there's a government-backed digital identity system that verifies your name, your address, your date of birth, etc., whatever is relevant for that country. And then you're going to have all these private companies that are innovating new useful tools on top of that. But they're no longer going to be the ones saying, yep, we've verified your passport. It'll be, we have verified your passport against the UK government database, or we have verified your passport against the US government database, etc. So it's definitely going to, I think we're going to see more of a legitimacy built into digital identity because we're going to have more and more governments getting involved in providing that kind of single source of truth, which is ultimately it allows some like companies like SumSub to have more fun. We can then really do that innovation arm of it. We can start streamlining customers' lives. Like I actually just recently purchased a house. Actually, even recently got married. The entire process of changing my name on different documents, especially because I'm US and UK citizen, absolute nightmare. If I could just press a button or if I could just have SumSub do all of it for me, that would make my life 10 times easier. It's going to be those types of use cases that companies in this kind of private space within digital ID, they're going to start exploring and they're going to really address kind of what we've already started to see AI address and have that ease for consumers. So things that used to take so much time or were so burdensome no longer need to be as burdensome.
Congratulations on the marriage and the house. Great
Thank you.
news. You're welcome. So I want to find out, I want to thank you very much for your time today. I have one last question I want to find out. It's like if there is one lesson, like from your personal journey that you would pass along to someone entering this field now, what lesson would that be?
Oof, it's a heavy one to end with. Um, I would say be open and be curious. So when I first came into this, I didn't know much about digital identity, but it's crazy to me how much I've been able to pick up and learn about it in my time just working because it's something that you interact with every single day, but you don't necessarily realize it. So I'd really say to anyone who wants to enter this space, be it a product role, sales role, or even something like me where you're doing more of a policy and government affairs role, is be curious because every single country has different type of identity documents. They also have different types of digital ID platforms. Some, like I said, my last example, Estonia, very, very far ahead. Others, just a brand new topic that they're just starting to explore. So I think it's also a really unique space where we're going to see a lot of change in the next couple of years. We're going to see positive moves where I think some products and solutions are going to be introduced to streamline consumers' lives. And unfortunately, we're probably also going to see negative things where fraud is going to get more and more sophisticated. So we're going to have to figure out how do we protect consumers who are using digital identity to streamline their lives. So and that's why I say like be curious because you need to almost see both sides of the relationship. And you need to almost put yourself in the shoes of a fraudster to really wrap your head around how they might go about stealing something like your passport number or stealing something like your date of birth. So you need to be curious, you need to be willing to kind of see both sides of that over the next couple of years as digital identity continues to grow.
Awesome. Great advice. I love it. Thank you very much. I enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much.